Imagine a world left entirely to itself, a land adrift in a vast blue ocean, evolving on its own terms for millions of years. This is the story of New Zealand, or Aotearoa, the land of the long white cloud. Its tale is not one of grand empires or continental crossroads. Instead, it is a story of profound isolation. This splendid solitude became the crucible in which a truly unique corner of our planet was forged. It allowed nature to conduct a remarkable experiment, creating life forms seen nowhere else. And when humans finally arrived, this isolation would shape their destiny in ways they could never have anticipated, creating a culture and a nation that stands as a global rarity. The sheer distance that separates New Zealand from its neighbors is honestly difficult to comprehend. Australia, its closest large landmass, lies over 2,000 kilometers away across the tempestuous Tasman Sea. To the east, there is nothing but the endless expanse of the Pacific Ocean, until the shores of South America. This immense watery barrier acted as a shield for millennia. It filtered the flow of life, preventing many species from ever reaching these shores. It was a fortress of solitude, guarding a biological treasure chest. The result was an evolutionary path that diverged dramatically from the rest of the world, a living museum of ancient life. This isolation did not just shape the natural world, it profoundly influenced human history. For most of humanity's existence, these islands remained untouched, a silent paradise known only to the birds and the sea. When people finally did arrive, they were some of the last great explorers on Earth, voyaging across the world's largest ocean in magnificent canoes. Their journey was a testament to human courage and navigational genius. But their arrival also marked the end of New Zealand's splendid isolation and the beginning of a new, complex chapter in its story, one where cultures would meet and eventually learn to coexist in this remote sanctuary. The theme of isolation is the thread that runs through every aspect of New Zealand's identity. It fostered a spirit of self-reliance and innovation, a necessity when help is thousands of kilometers away. It preserved a natural heritage of breathtaking beauty and strangeness, and it created the conditions for a unique social experiment, a nation that would grapple with its colonial past to forge a bicultural future. To understand New Zealand is to understand the power of isolation, its ability to protect, to challenge, and ultimately to create something the world has never seen before. It is a story of a land apart, which, because of its solitude, has so much to teach the rest of us. Long before it was New Zealand, this land was part of a much larger continent, a vast landmass we now call Zealandia. Around 85 million years ago, a great geological shift began. The supercontinent Gondwana started to break apart. Zealandia, carrying a precious cargo of ancient plants and animals, began to drift away into the Pacific. Over millions of years, most of this continent sank beneath the waves, leaving only its highest peaks exposed to the sun and sky. These peaks are the islands of New Zealand we see today. They are the last visible remnants of a lost continent, an ark that had set sail on a solitary voyage through deep time. This geological separation had a profound effect on the evolution of life here. With no land mammals to compete with or prey upon them, birds became the rulers of the forest. They evolved to fill ecological niches that mammals occupy elsewhere. The mighty moa, some species towering over 3 meters tall, browsed on low-hanging branches like deer. The giant Haast's eagle, with a wingspan like a small aircraft, became the apex predator, hunting the moa from above. Countless other species of flightless birds, like the inquisitive kiwi and the plump weka, scurried through the forest undergrowth, safe from terrestrial threats. It was, truly, a kingdom of birds. The forests themselves were ancient and primeval. They were dominated by towering podocarps, like Rimu and Totara, trees with lineages stretching back to the time of the dinosaurs. Giant tree ferns formed a lush green canopy, creating a world that felt prehistoric. In this green sanctuary lived creatures that seemed to be relics from another age. The tuatara, a reptile that looks like a lizard but belongs to its own distinct order, is a perfect example. Its ancestors walked the earth alongside the dinosaurs, and it has survived here, in this isolated refuge, virtually unchanged for over 200 million years. It is a true living fossil. For millions upon millions of years, this world continued in perfect silent harmony. The islands were a symphony of birdsong. the rustle of leaves, and the crash of waves upon the shore. There were no human footprints on the beaches, no sound of an axe in the forest. It was a world in waiting, a pristine ecosystem, developing in almost complete isolation from the rest of the planet. This long period of solitude created a biological paradise that was both beautiful and incredibly vulnerable. Its inhabitants had never known a mammalian predator, a vulnerability that would have dramatic consequences when the age of isolation finally came to an end. Sometime around the 13th century, after millennia of solitude, the first humans arrived. They were master mariners, Polynesian explorers who had navigated the vast Pacific using the stars, the currents, and the flight of birds as their guides. Their journey in great double-hulled canoes, or waka, was one of the most remarkable feats of open ocean voyaging in human history. They came from a homeland known as Hawaii, and they found a land larger, colder, and more rugged than any they had known. They were the first people to see the snow-capped mountains, the dense forests, and the steaming volcanic landscapes. They were the Tangata Wenua, the people of the land. These first arrivals explored and settled the islands with astonishing speed. They established communities and kinship groups known as iwi, or tribes, and hapu, or sub-tribes. They adapted their Polynesian culture to this new temperate environment. They learned to hunt the giant moa and other native birds, to fish the rich coastal waters, and to cultivate crops like the kumara, or sweet potato, which they had brought with them across the ocean. Their survival depended on their deep understanding of the natural world. They developed a profound spiritual connection to the land, seeing themselves not as its owners, but as its guardians. This relationship with the land, known as Kaitiakitanga, became the cornerstone of Maori culture. Every mountain, river, and forest had its own story, its own spiritual essence, or Maori. This connection was expressed through powerful art forms. The intricate carvings that adorned their meeting houses, canoes, and tools told the stories of their ancestors and their gods. The mesmerizing haka, a ceremonial dance of immense power and passion, conveyed their identity and strength. The beautiful moko, or traditional facial and body tattoos, signified a person's genealogy, status, and history. Their culture was woven into the very fabric of the land they now called home. For several centuries, Maori society flourished in isolation from the rest of the world. They developed complex social structures, sophisticated traditions, and a rich oral history that passed knowledge down through generations. They managed the land's resources, sometimes to the point of extinction, as was the fate of the moa. But they also learned the importance of sustainable practices. They were the sole human inhabitants of Aotearoa, a proud and resilient people who had shaped a unique and vibrant culture in the most remote corner of the earth. Their world was about to be changed forever by the arrival of new visitors from a world away. In 1642, the long isolation of Aotearoa was briefly interrupted. The Dutch explorer Abel Tasman, sailing in search of a great southern continent, sighted the western coast of the South Island. His first encounter with Maori was tragic and violent, born of mutual misunderstanding. After a brief and hostile meeting in what is now Golden Bay, Tasman named the place Murderers Bay and sailed away without ever setting foot on shore. He put the land on European maps, naming it New Zealand after a province in the Netherlands. Then, for more than a century, the islands slipped back into their solitude, a place of mystery on the far side of the world. The next significant arrival came in 1769. Captain James Cook, a brilliant British navigator and cartographer, arrived on the HMS Endeavour. Cook's voyages were different. He and his crew, which included the naturalist Joseph Banks, spent months circumnavigating and mapping the islands with incredible accuracy. They documented the unique flora and fauna, and they had extensive interactions with various Maori iwi. While some encounters were peaceful and based on trade and curiosity, others were marked by conflict and bloodshed. Cook's detailed maps and reports revealed New Zealand to Europe, opening the floodgates for whalers, sealers, traders, and missionaries to follow. The arrival of these early Europeans brought immense and often devastating change. They introduced new technologies like metal tools and muskets, which revolutionized Maori society and warfare. The musket, in particular, led to a period of intense intertribal conflict known as the Musket Wars in the early 19th century, which destabilized the country and resulted in a catastrophic loss of life. At the same time, new diseases like measles and influenza, to which Maori had no immunity, swept through communities with deadly effect. The world that Maori had known for centuries was being irrevocably altered by these new connections to the outside world. As more British settlers began to arrive, drawn by tales of a fertile land, the British government grew concerned about the lawlessness and the potential for other colonial powers, like France, to claim the territory. To establish a formal colony and a legal basis for settlement, Britain decided it needed a treaty with the Maori chiefs. In 1840, Captain William Hobson was sent to negotiate this agreement. The document they created, the Treaty of Waitangi, was intended to be a partnership between Maori and the British Crown. However, its profound ambiguities and differing interpretations would become the source of conflict and debate for generations to come. The Treaty of Waitangi, signed on February 6, 1840, was a document of two versions. The English version stated that Maori chiefs ceded sovereignty to the British Queen in exchange for the rights and protections of British subjects and continued ownership of their lands, forests, and fisheries. The Maori version, however, used the word kawanatanga, meaning governance, not full sovereignty, suggesting a partnership rather than a complete handover of power. These fundamental differences in understanding laid the groundwork for decades of conflict. For the British, the treaty was a green light for settlement and colonization. For many Maori, it was a promise of protection that was soon to be broken. As the tide of British settlement swelled, so did the demand for land. The New Zealand Company and other settlement schemes aggressively acquired vast tracts of land, often through dubious and unfair purchases that Maori leaders disputed. Tensions quickly escalated into open warfare. The New Zealand Wars, a series of conflicts that raged intermittently from the 1840s to the 1870s, pitted various Maori iwi against colonial and imperial troops. These were not simple rebellions. They were wars fought by Maori to defend their land, their authority, rangatiratanga, and their way of life against the overwhelming pressure of colonization. Despite heroic resistance, the wars ultimately resulted in Maori defeat. The colonial government passed punitive laws, confiscating millions of acres of the most fertile land from iwi deemed to be in rebellion. This process, known as raupatu, devastated the Maori economy and social structure. It shattered the traditional relationship between people and their ancestral lands. By the end of the 19th century, Maori had lost most of their land, and their population had plummeted due to disease and the hardships of war. It was a period of immense loss and sorrow, a dark chapter in the nation's history that threatened the very survival of Maori culture. Yet, even in the face of such adversity, Maori resilience endured. Leaders and prophets emerged, seeking new ways to resist assimilation and preserve their culture. They used petitions, delegations to London, and the new parliamentary system to fight for their treaty rights. They held on to their language, their stories, and their traditions, passing them down through the generations, even when it was discouraged or forbidden. This incredible resilience and determination to hold on to their identity laid the foundation for a cultural renaissance that would emerge in the late 20th century. The spirit of the Tangata Whenua, though deeply wounded, was never extinguished. As the conflicts of the 19th century subsided, New Zealand began to forge its own path as a nation, distinct from its British parent. Still isolated from the world's major power centers, it developed a unique political and social character. This isolation fostered a pragmatic and innovative spirit, and the country became known as a social laboratory. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, New Zealand led the world in progressive social reforms. Most famously, in 1893, it became the first self-governing country in the world to grant all women the right to vote, a landmark achievement driven by courageous suffragists like Kate Shepherd. This pioneering spirit continued. The government introduced old-age pensions in 1898, establishing one of the world's first comprehensive social security systems. It created a system for industrial conciliation and arbitration to settle labor disputes peacefully, a radical idea at the time. This period of reform demonstrated a growing sense of a distinct New Zealand identity, one that valued fairness, social justice, and the well-being of its citizens. The nation was building a society based on the belief that the state had a responsibility to protect the vulnerable and ensure a decent standard of living for all, a philosophy that would define it for much of the 20th century. The journey toward full independence was gradual. New Zealanders fought with distinction and great sacrifice alongside Britain in the Boer War, and later in World War I and World War II. These global conflicts strengthened a sense of national pride and identity, but also highlighted the country's vulnerability and distance from its traditional protector. The fall of Singapore in 1942 was a particular shock, demonstrating that Britain could no longer guarantee New Zealand's security. This realization prompted a shift, as New Zealand began to look more to the United States and to its own place in the Pacific for its security and foreign policy. In 1947, New Zealand formally adopted the Statute of Westminster, officially accepting its status as a fully independent nation, with the power to make its own laws and foreign policy decisions. This marked the final step in its political evolution from a self-governing colony to a sovereign state. Throughout this period, however, the Māori experience remained largely marginalized. While the Pākehā, New Zealanders of European descent, population built a progressive welfare state, Māori continued to face systemic discrimination, land loss, and the erosion of their culture and language. The nation's democratic growth was not yet complete, as it had not yet fully reconciled with its founding partnership. The latter half of the 20th century saw New Zealand embark on another profound transformation. This time, the change came from within. A growing Māori urban population and a new generation of activists began to demand that the nation confront its colonial past and honor the promises of the Treaty of Waitangi. The Māori protest movement of the 1970s and 80s brought issues of land rights, language, and social injustice to the forefront of the national conversation. This period of activism was challenging and often divisive, but it was essential in pushing New Zealand towards a more honest understanding of itself and its history. In response, the nation began a remarkable journey toward biculturalism. The Waitangi Tribunal was established in 1975 and later empowered to investigate historical breaches of the treaty. This has led to historical apologies from the Crown and significant settlements that provide cultural and economic redress to Aiboy. Crucially, Te Reo Māori, the Māori language, which was once in danger of disappearing, was made an official language of New Zealand in 1987. A powerful cultural revitalization movement has seen the language and traditions flourish through initiatives like Kohanga Rio, Māori language immersion preschools, and Māori television and radio. This bicultural identity is now a central pillar of modern New Zealand. It is visible in public life, from bilingual signage to the powerful performance of the haka by national sports teams like the All Blacks. It represents a commitment, albeit an ongoing and imperfect one, to weaving together two founding cultures into a single national fabric. This unique internal focus has been mirrored by a distinct international posture. Shaped by its isolation, New Zealand has carved out a reputation as an independent, peace-loving nation. Its anti-nuclear stance in the 1980s, which fractured its alliance with the United States, was a bold declaration of its values on the world stage. Today, New Zealand is often seen as a beacon of stability, progress, and environmental consciousness. Its isolation protected its stunning landscapes, and there is now a strong national commitment to preserving this natural heritage, encapsulated in the 100% Pure New Zealand brand. The nation's journey from an isolated outpost of the British Empire to a proud, independent, and bicultural Pacific nation is extraordinary. Its story, born of immense solitude, demonstrates how a country can confront a difficult past to build a more inclusive and peaceful future, offering a quiet but powerful example to a turbulent world. It is a rarity, a nation that could only have been shaped by the profound and enduring power of isolation.